Okay. All right. So chapter 6 is more of the payroll stuff. And I know this is going to sound silly, but we did cover chapter 5, right? Like a lot of people turned in chapter 5 quiz. So we have covered chapter 5. Okay, good, cool. So chapter 6 it's basically anything and everything you can think of in terms of payroll. So the first thing we're going to talk about in 6.1 is gross earnings, wages, and salaries. Okay. We're going to be able to calculate gross earnings for salaries and wages, find overtime earnings for more than 40 hours per week, use the overtime premium method of calculating gross earnings, and find overtime earnings for over 8 hours of work per day. I will let you guys know that I have had jobs where I've gotten overtime. I obviously also have jobs like now where even though I work over 40 hours a week, it's for 4 different jobs, so no one's paying me overtime. But what was interesting about what we're going to learn today is even though I have calculated my own overtime in the past, the way that this book has us calculating overtime, I don't really agree with it. I don't want you guys to think like that is the only way you can calculate overtime. This book was published in 2012 originally, and then it's been like updated twice since then, and I just kind of feel like it's a little bit off. You'll kind of see what I mean as you work through the homework problems. But yeah, there's my side statement for that. Calculating gross earnings. The first step in preparing payroll is to determine gross earnings or total amount earned. Several deductions must be subtracted from the gross earnings to arrive at net pay, the amount the employee actually receives. So, we all know that we have to pay taxes. Obviously, this is a great semester to take this class because we actually have to all suffer through doing our taxes during it. These deductions include different taxes throughout the, from each pay if you're lucky. I will give you an example of when you're not so lucky. And then basically what happens is that you have this gross earnings. So like at the end of the year, when you get your year to date and you're like, oh, wow, I made this much money. Why doesn't it feel like it? Because of all these deductions. Plus, you have life expenses. Okay, so how do we find gross earnings? We take the number of hours worked times the rate per hour. That's period, no matter what. Where it starts to change is typically people work 40 hours, right? So let's get my little pen out so I can help you guys with some notes. So the typical is we take 40 hours times, I don't know. Does anyone know what minimum wage is now? I never keep up with it. What is it?
$7.25.
$7.25. Okay. So we'll go with that for minimum wage. By the way, any of you currently in school right now, you can argue for more than minimum wage because you're getting an education for yourself. I can tell you that I've not had a job at that amount. I don't feel like I ever have. I think like my lowest was $10 an hour. And that was like when I was working at Subway. Even when I went over to Red Lobster, I'm pretty sure I talked them into like 11 or 12. So, yeah, fight for yourselves is my bottom line. And if someone's really going to argue you that you want more than the minimum wage, then that's not a job for you. Keep looking. I mean, you can take a minimum wage job and then work there for so much amount of time, but then always try to better yourself. That is a terrible minimum wage. Okay, so this is your typical here's where things start to differ. Sometimes we can have people that work part-time. That would be me, where I'm at. I just have 4 part-time jobs, so it's ridiculous. So, um, for the school, I can't work any more than 26 hours a week, and then we'll just pick a number and say it's $15 an hour, which that is true if I'm tutoring, which I don't do that this semester. Um, but I make different for depending upon the very many hats that I wear. You can also have, so this part-time, it's typically, the typical for part-time is about 30 hours. Like that's kind of like the max. Um, I don't know if any of you have nurses in your family. A lot of times nurses will get these pretty great contracts where they work like 36 hours a week, but within their contract, that's written as full-time. Because I think they do like 312s or something. So, and they can always pick up extra, but then it's overtime. And then overtime is our other non-typical situation, which depending upon what your job is, what kind of situations there are. Right now, the people that do snow removal, they're getting a bunch of overtime, right? So you could get potentially, you can get a pretty decent amount of overtime, but then the rate is different. Okay. So we typically do what's called time and a half. So you take your regular rate and multiply it by time and a half. That's one way to find it. The other way to find it is to take half of the 725 and then add it to 725. You're still getting time and a half, but it's done a little differently. So 1.5 times your rate. That is for your overtime. You may certainly take that all down. Someone remind me to do attendance at the end, 'cause I will probably forget. Okay. I do have the chat open if anyone has questions for during the chat that they would rather not say out loud. But all right, so let's keep it moving. Anyone have questions on that material? Okay, trust me, we are going to work with it quite a lot. So this is an example of what they call a pay card. Notice that here they're saying no time clock required. That's because back in the day, which I'm old enough to be included under, we used to have to take our pay cards and you would go to the clock in, clock out machine and you'd put your card in and you'd pull the little lever and then you'd pull it out and then you'd go do your work. And if you had to take a break, then you would do it for your break and then you would also do it when you were ready to leave. Technology has obviously come a long way. So most of this is now done electronically. My preference, I guess at this point, I just kind of like large chunk sums. Like I get told work for 3 months and you'll get this much money. But if I had to pick between the two, there are pros and cons to both. So the old pay card punch system, you were looking at a possibility of people could potentially lose your pay card. So then they'd have to find it, but then you probably wouldn't get your money until a little bit later. People could try and kind of sabotage your pay card. But then you can also kind of have, glitches happen in the system. And even though you clocked in and out for a whole week, all of a sudden your punches are gone. So, I mean, both kind of have like pluses and minuses. I'm sure some of you may have horror stories like I do about getting paid. I know we all talked about that horrible card that some of our companies in the past have made us get. That obviously has nothing to do really with the keeping track of your pay, like in terms of your hours, but it's how you got paid. So slightly similar. Sorry, let's take a look at this example. It says Sarah is doing the payroll for 2 employees at her Starbucks store. She must first complete a payroll ledger. Okay, so obviously, if you're paying people, it's coming out of the business money, and you have to have a record of that. So all you would do is you would add up going across L. Nelson's and T. Orr's. You can see they went ahead and did that for you, 23 hours and 27.25 hours. One person must have worked there a little bit longer or maybe came in with some experience. So they're at 1075 and the other person's at 980. The other person could also just be older. Like I said, there's a lot of different ways to work for yourself. Maybe one person, fought for their rate and the other person didn't, you know? Okay. All right, so obviously if this were a problem on your test or quiz, you would then fill in the 23 like this and the 27.25. And then we would obviously take our multiplication, so 23 times 10.75. We get 247.25. And then we get 980 times 27.25. So a little bit different. They obviously worked a little bit longer, so even though they're at the lower pay, they're getting a little bit more money. However, what's not being included here? Why is it called gross and not net? What haven't they done?
Taxes.
Right, they didn't do any of the deductions. So a lot of times your homework this chapter will ask what's the gross, and then they will probably work deductions in chapter 7. Can't remember what chapter 7's called. Give me one hot second. Let me find our table of contents. Where are you? There it is. Okay, so no, it might just be, yeah, it's later on in chapter 6, income tax withholding. And trust me, that's the section that we're all going to pull our hair out. It's a good thing mine's already short. Okay. So this is just going to go through and show us. We already did it. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay. So now then they've plugged everything in, and that's okay that I went really fast because we already did that. Okay, finding overtime hours. Like I said, the typical is 1.5 times your normal rate. Possibilities where this would be different. Holiday overtime pay is potentially, not always, but potentially can be what's called double time and a half. Well, double time. So you get 2 times your regular rate. And then it's also kind of interesting because, like, basically it works out to where you'll do an 8-hour shift, but you're getting paid for 16 hours. Or, if you're doing a 16-hour shift, then you're really getting paid for 32 hours. And then sometimes what happens with holiday pay as well, depending upon the company and kind of what your career is, especially in a more labor-intensive career. So like linemen, people who are outside in the elements, they will often get the following day off, or what nurses get is they get a flex holiday. So basically they're told, you have this quarter And if you want to use your flex holiday, you can use it any day within that quarter. Okay. It's pretty nice. My sister's a nurse, my mom's a nurse, so they in the past have gotten that. My mom is a professor now, so she just gets the time off. She doesn't have to work extra for it. So it's pretty nice, and it can definitely kind of help you decide maybe what you would want to, like, the career path you might want to go into. I'm definitely not saying that there aren't careers out there that, everything comes with pros and cons, right, guys? So, like, I don't get paid overtime, but I also don't have to work every single month out of the year, right? So I work like 8 months, and then in the summer I tutor. But, if I want to take a vacation, I just tell my tutoring people, hey, we're going to double up this week or that week, and I'm taking next week off. And it's not like I even have to do that massively in advance. I just have to kind of do it the week before, whatever. Um, so you kind of have to weigh that kind of stuff whenever you're thinking about what career do you really want to do. I can tell you that I made the most money in jobs where I could work overtime, but that was also because I was single. So I didn't really care what I did, and I just chose to be a workaholic. Um, Again, to each their own, but that's how I made my money. So okay, gross earnings. Remember, what we would do is we would take the earnings at regular rate and then add them to the earnings at the time and a half. And that's if you have overtime included. Okay. Never, never, ever, ever sign off on a job that tells you you can't have overtime. And so basically the jobs that you can't sign off for overtime would be jobs that what they say are salaried. So here's the upside to salaried. If you are not like me, which means you have completely awesome boundaries and you can say, I'm only working 40 hours a week, or, you can get away with working a little bit less. That is where salary is the bee's knees. Okay. So you're getting paid, 50 to $75,000 a year, three zeros, and you only have to work 40 or less hours a week. Awesome. Here's where that can kind of bite people in the butt. They get salary, they get told they don't get overtime, but they're okay with it because they're getting paid this big, large sum of money, right? More money than we probably will ever see. But then they turn around and they work more than 40 hours a week, and they're not getting paid for their overtime. So then do you know how they figure out how much time they actually are getting paid, or how much they're getting paid per hour? They then have to take their salary and basically cut it in half, because even though they are even though they're still making the same amount, they're working twice as much. Okay, so then that amount kind of changes. That was definitely something that I had to kind of figure out when I had one of my salary jobs, because I was like, oh, it's okay, I'm making the most money I've ever made, like, this is fantastic. And then I turned around and realized that I was gypping myself because I couldn't say no to working. It's okay, sometimes you can work with the TV on, sitting on your couch. It's totally not really the same thing. All right, let's look at this example. Complete the following payroll ledger. So same thing basically. So we have this person. I don't understand why they can't give me first names. Their last names are so hard to pronounce. But anyway, so employee 1 is going to be on the top. They have 40 regular hours, and they have 4.75 overtime hours. And the person on the bottom has 40 regular hours and 6.25 overtime hours. I would ask you, how did I get that? But they also showed you how to do it down here, so it makes my point mute. So how do we figure out our regular and our overtime? Someone tell me what to do. What's the first step? How do I get my regular rate for right here?
Multiply 40 times 10.30.
Good. So then we get 412. And I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom. I'm going to do my 40 times my 9.48. While I'm doing that, somebody else figure out what our overtime rate's going to be. And are we going to have 1 or 2 overtime rates? Are they the same for each person? Okay, they're not going to be the same because we have 2 different rates. So we're going to take 1030 and we're going to multiply it by what?
$412.
So close. What we have to do before we can do that, Anna, is we have to take 1030 and remember we're finding overtime now. So do you remember what we multiply our rate by to find our overtime?
Isn't it 1.5?
So we're going to take 1030 times 1.5 and we end up with an overtime rate of 15.45. And then we'll multiply our overtime hours by that. And we end up getting 73. And you guys definitely have to write this down because my writing is atrocious right now and I don't know why, and it's very sad. So if you don't write it down, you probably will not realize what it's actually saying. Okay, so now we're going to do the same thing, but for the bottom. So we'll take 9.48 times our 1.5. And we're going to get an overtime rate on the bottom of 4.22 or 14.22. And then we multiply it by our overtime. So times, times 6.25. And we get 8.86. All right. And then our last step would just be to do what? What do you guys think?
Add the two together, the regular and overtime.
So here's why this is super, super important to you guys. If you guys have a job where you are in fact getting overtime or opportunity to overtime, you definitely want to make sure that your overtime is being calculated correctly. What did I just do? That's a 39. Okay. And honestly, the sense I'm not going to be such a picky person. There's a lot of money that we have to work with in this chapter. So as long as you have it dollar-wise, I'm probably not going to take off for being off on the cents, or at least if I do, I'm not going to take off that much. If I end up forgetting that, just kind of email me when I send you feedback and remind me that I said that about chapter 6. Okay, so that may be hard for some of you guys to read, so let me go ahead and clear that all off because I'm sure they're going to walk us through it, and then you guys can have an easier time writing it. Okay. So there it is, written a lot nicer than how I wrote it, but at least you guys know I know how to do your math. It is really, really good for you guys to know how to do your overtime calculations so that you don't have to basically get swindled. Companies are notorious for trying not to pay people what they deserve to be paid. Not all companies, but definitely some. I know some of you take notes, so I'm trying to give you a little bit of time to write that all down. Okay. Alrighty. And the PowerPoints are on Canvas, so if you need a little bit more time with that, they are there for you. Okay, so that's everything kind of written out in the ledger. Definitely make sure you write everything out so you do not, end up messing up anywhere and having silly errors. So this is just kind of showing you a little bit of a different way, I guess. There's straight time earnings, which will be multiplied by the regular rate. Overtime premium is 0.5 times our regular rate. So you see how I was saying that there are different methods that they're showing us for different things. I don't agree with it. I think it should just be a straight 0.5, or 1.5, but that's me. So do you want to write down here that overtime premium is overtime hours times 0.5 of the regular rate? Don't ask me what the difference is other than that math. Definitely read your contract closely. Obviously, you want time and a half. You don't want this premium. I will try to get through 2 sections today. We will see how much time we have. Okay. So this week, Holly Kelly worked 40 hours and 12 hours overtime. Her regular rate of pay is $17.40. Her total gross pay using the overtime premium method. Find her total gross pay. So here they kind of already helped us out with that. They took 0.5 times $17.40. If we want to go ahead and finish that, then we would have 40 hours times our $17.40 plus 12 hours times our premium. All right, so I know my zeros look like either Jesus fishes there or sixes, but they are zeros. So I will verify, but somebody else also figure out what that's going to be. So how much is Holly Kelly making with this premium option?
Is it 840 cents?
Mm-hmm. Wow. Writing on the board today, not the most easiest. Okay, 840 cents. Okay. And like I said, they'll probably give us the answer on the next slide. So what just happened? Oh, okay. I guess that's why there's a difference. All right, let's go back and look at that again. Ah, look what word we forgot to look at. Boop. Okay, so let's do a little bit of an experiment. Let's see what happens if we compare this to the regular way we were doing it. So we had, if we take 40 times, what was it, 17? Let's see what the difference would be. 1740. And then let's take 1740 times 0.1.5. And then that answer times 12. Okay, so if we do it the old way, they would be making $1,009.20. So we literally just proved that it doesn't make a difference. So, I don't know if that's just this case. So this is the this one up here is the premium option. And this one that I'm writing in red or burgundy is the old option with the time and a half. And it ended up literally being the same. So I can't tell you if that will work every time. You guys can maybe do some kind of experiments with that. Maybe when you get to the homework, if it says, you know, to use the premium method, make sure with the premium method that you don't make the mistake we did initially. You want to take the total time. And that's because we just didn't read that formula close enough. Holy crap, this is a really long lesson. Okay. All right. Find overtime earnings for over 8 hours of work per day. So some companies pay the time and a half rate for all worked over 8 hours in any day, no matter how many hours are worked in the week. So that's kind of nice because so let's say you work your 40 hours or, you know, 42 hours where normally you would only get, you know, 2 hours overtime. You also get 2 hours overtime if your day is like 10 hours instead of 8 hours. So there are different ways to get overtime. Understanding what double time, shift differentials, and split shift premiums are. Has anyone ever had a shift differential? Okay, so this is how it works. A lot of times it happens with 24 care facilities, so nursing homes, residential treatment facilities, you know, psych hospitals, hospitals in general. A lot of times people do not like working the grave shift, okay? Or sometimes they don't like working the swing shift either. So sometimes your swing shift will have shift differentials too. But for instance, whenever I worked one of the jobs where I could do overtime, I started out on grave shift and then I switched to days. But a lot of times I would work 3 to 11, 11 to 7, and I would make bank. And the 11 to 7 shift was always $1 more per hour. Okay, that's why I initially signed up for it. So, and then split shift premiums, that's because a lot of people don't want to leave work and then turn around and drive right back to work after so many hours. So they give you split shift premiums as well. Double time, we talked about this, holidays, and in some industries, Saturday and Sundays. So like not all the time, but sometimes school districts, if well, they have to pay their coaches, but sometimes like if a teacher comes on a Saturday or a Sunday to help, say with like a dance or something, sometimes they get paid a little bit for that. Most of the times teachers just have to volunteer for stuff. But you know, if your company is typically Monday through Friday and you're working on a Sunday or a Saturday, typically you get paid for that. I think CPAs might get paid during the tax season for working on the weekends, but I'm not 100% sure. Shift differentials compensate employees for working less desirable hours, i.e., like, you know, the 3 to 11 or 11 to 7. And then shift premiums are hours hours are staggered, so on the job during the busiest times. So like maybe people that would come in for the dinner rush, like if you're at a restaurant, but then they leave like when it starts getting dead. Most of the time that's only like 3 hours, so most people aren't going to want to come in and do it, although I'm sure a lot of high school students probably are totally fine working that. All right. Compensatory time, I don't know if I'm saying that right, basically comp time. For overtime hours worked, instead of additional money, an employee is given time off from regular work schedule as compensation for overtime hours already worked. So the same job that I worked the overnight shifts on, basically if they needed me to stay, a lot of the times they would be like, listen, if you'll work 11 to 7 and then stay 7 to 3 for somebody who called off, then we'll give you tonight off. So like instead of paying me, you know, to be crazy, which they couldn't really keep me for 24 hours anyway. But there was a lot of times where I would have only 8 hours off in between. And I lived an hour away, so I really only had 6 hours of sleep or less, maybe 5. So sometimes the comp time is a lot nicer than the overtime. Sometimes. Finding equivalent earnings for different pay periods. So the second common method of finding a gross earnings is using salary, a fixed amount given as much per hour period between paychecks. So most of the time it's like 2 weeks. You can get paid bi-monthly, which is actually different than every 2 weeks. You can get paid monthly, and that's pretty much the most people don't get anything weirder than that. Again, remember though, with salary, you're looking at no matter how many hours you work, you're getting that flat rate no matter what. Okay. And you always have to kind of tell yourself, is what I'm doing really worth me getting paid only this much money? All right. Here we go. Common paycheck periods, monthly 12 paychecks each year. Teachers in Virginia are paid on a monthly salary, and they only get it over the summer if they set it up that way. So if you know anyone who's going into education and they're really happy because they got a job in Virginia, make sure that you let them know that they get paid monthly and that they will have to either save for themselves for the summer, get a summer job, or they will basically kind of run out of money. Trust me, it happens. I think 75% of my paycheck went to my living. Semi-monthly, twice each month, 24 paychecks. Bi-weekly, every 2 weeks, 26 paychecks, and weekly, 52 paychecks. Jobs that pay you weekly are nice, but it can also be hard. If you're getting a job that's paying you weekly, you pretty much want that to either be a second income, so that like either your partner is making, on a bi-weekly or bi-monthly, or semi-monthly rather, pay scale, or the weekly is kind of like maybe your second job. So like you're getting paid every week, but then you're also getting paid every other week. I just think that unless you're getting a bunch of money, like $800 a week, which I don't even know what job would pay you that, this 52 pays in a year, although it's nice to get paid every week, it's really hard to pay your bills that way. You just end up running out of money, or living check to check, and it can just be pretty hard. So I recommend either the bi-weekly or the semi-monthly. The only thing that's kind of crappy about the semi-monthly is that it typically happens on the 1st and the 15th. So like sometimes it's the 31st or the 1st, and then sometimes it's always the 15th of the month. Whereas the bi-weekly, that's literally every other Friday, and that to me is the best. But obviously everybody has their own preferences. Let's see. Do we need this example? I guess we can go over it. A human resources manager needs to compare the earnings for 4 employees. Scott is weekly salary of $546. Tanya is a biweekly salary of $1686. Julie is a semi-monthly salary of $1850, and Bill is a monthly salary of $2,890. For each, find earnings per year, earnings per month, and earnings per week. Okay. And we're just going to go through this. I'm not going to write it out. So Scott, you have to take his weekly, multiply it by 52, and you get your per year. Then once you have your per year, you divide it by 12 to get your per month. And then we already knew his was per week. With the second person, Tanya, we have to take your 1686, multiply it by 26. That gets you the year. Take the year, divide it by 12, it gets you the month, and then take the 1686 and divide it by 2, and that gets you the per week. Okay, so Tanya must have a higher job or more experience or something like that over Scott. Okay, Julie and Bill. So Julie, you have to multiply by 24 to get the yearly, and then you multiply it by 2 to get the per month, and you divide it by 52 to get the per week. Right? Bill, you're multiplying by 12 because he has the monthly rate. We already know the monthly, and then we have to divide the yearly by 52 to get the per week. Okay, so I think, what was it, the second person? Did Tanya have the most, or did Julie have the most? Julie has the most per week. Okay. All right. Okay. I think this is the last example for this section. Monica Gonzalez earns $936 a week as an assistant to the vice president of a community bank. A normal work week for her is 40 hours. Find her gross earnings if she works 45 hours 1 week and is paid time and a half for everything over 40. So you could take, what do you guys think the approach could be here to figure it out? How would you find out her regular rate? What do you think you would do?
936 times 4, and then that times 12.
So that
Or-
would be if we were doing the other thing. What they want us to do is they want us to figure out if this is how much she gets paid in a week, and she typically works 40 hours a week. How can we find out what she would get paid if she worked 45 hours 1 week? What do you think about that one? What would you have to find out in order to find overtime rate? You have to figure out so we have how much she's getting paid in 1 week. Okay. but that's the same thing as saying every 40 hours, right? So then how much is her rate? Remember, her rate is going to be for how many hours? What do you guys think? Do I typically give you guys a rate in 40-hour increments? What do I give you a rate in normally? By the way, I will let you know that
Monthly?
she's, what's that?
You give us the rates hourly.
Hourly, right. I will let you know that she has a really nice hourly rate. So how do you figure out that hourly rate? You'll take 936 and do what with it?
Divide.
Divided by 40, very good. So she has an hourly rate of $23.40. Okay, so then we're gonna take that $23.40, we're gonna multiply it by 5. Oh, no, we're not. That's the regular rate. Now we have to find the overtime rate, right? I got ahead of myself. So what's our overtime rate going to be?
35.1.
So we will take 35.1 and multiply it by 5. Why am I choosing by 5?
That's 5 hours past the 40.
Very good. And then we'll take 2340 and we'll multiply it by 40. And we'll add them together and you get a total of 1,111.50 for that week. But that is, remember, her gross earnings, because we have to remember that if it was her net earnings or what she would take home, there would be all those deductions to still happen, okay? I am going to get rid of it so you can see it written a little bit nicer. And there you go. Okay. This is the last slide for section 6.1. We have about 26 minutes left, so I am going to start section 6.2. But is there any questions on 6.1? No? Okay. I don't know how many of you have the actual textbook, but I will let you know when I do your homework and your quizzes. I have this thing next to me the whole time. Like, I'm looking at examples, I'm rereading stuff. This is not as easy of a class as I think some people initially think, or, what have you. So, okay, can you see this one, or do I have to reshare? You good? Cool. All right, so 6.2 is gross earnings, which is including, like, underneath that subheading, we're dealing with piecework and commissions. So commissions you guys have probably heard of. Okay, so real estate agents, car salesmen, sometimes insurance brokers, those are all people that work on commission, and sometimes they get commission and a base salary. Sometimes you'll have jobs that are only commission based. Never, ever, ever take a job that is just commission based unless you literally have selling cars built into your DNA. Okay? anytime you take a job that says we pay on commission, you need to follow that up with, is there a base salary as well? Because commission jobs, totally fine if there is also a base salary and if that base salary is something you can live on. Okay. Piecework is a little bit different. Piecework is more like when you're working in an assembly line or a factory. So it might be like if you are working in a chocolate factory and it's your job to, test every 200th candy bar, which, I mean, you're kind of probably needing hazard pay because you're looking at a future of diabetes. But regardless, it's based on how many units of something that you do X, Y, or Z with, and that's how you get paid. So if you're someone who's like really, really quick and really good at your job, you can get through a lot of units in an hour. There are certain personality types that are really, really good with these kind of jobs. Then piecework will be fine for you. I do not recommend purely commission work to anyone. Okay. So keep that in mind when you are considering jobs. Okay, so we are going, just let me see how many slides. Okay, so I don't think we are going to get through this whole thing, but we will start it. All right, we're going to find gross earnings for piecework, determine the gross earnings for differential piecework, find the gross pay for piecework with a guaranteed hourly wage, calculate the overtime earnings for piecework, and find gross earnings using commission rates times sales. Determine a commission using the variable commission rate and find the gross earnings with a salary plus commission. Okay, so we can tell that there's a lot of stuff going on in this section. Like I said, always know how you're getting paid. So there is a reason why McDonald's employees and Wendy's and every other fast food chain gets paid an hourly rate. We obviously don't know how many people are going to stop at a McDonald's every hour. So it's not like they can say, yes, we'll hire you, but only if you make 50 McChickens in 1 hour. Okay. So like, it's just not possible to have that kind of a system with certain jobs. Okay. So we are going to find the gross earnings for piecework. It's salaries and wages that depend on actual time on the job. That is time rates. So for instance, the way my pay is done for the college is they say that I can't go over 12 credit hours. And then each credit hour is supposed to work out to, I think, like 2.25 hours, something like that. So, I mean, in theory, if I take 2.25 times 12, I should only be working 27 hours a week for L-Tri-C. I can tell you that for my one job alone, I'm putting in 16 hours. And then I have your class and I have another class. And then you have to include prep time that I had prior to the semester starting. And then you have to include grading and emails and all that kind of stuff. So everything added up is probably more than 27 hours in a week. But it's not like I'm sitting here running a log because I really like my job. All right. I like all of my jobs. But that an example of a time rate would be something more like a hospital. If you work an 8-hour shift at the hospital, you work an 8-hour shift. Incentive rates. Pay is based on production and actual performance on the job. So that would be more like an assembly line. And piece work rate pays a given amount per item produced. So these two are pretty similar. Maybe they'll give us an example of a difference, but those are kind of the same in my brain. So I'm not sure if any of your exams touch on these two definitions, but if you were to flip-flop those, I'm probably going to just give it to you. So unless you can ridiculously memorize that, they're basically the same to me. If you guys end up reading something that I may have overlooked, please feel free to shoot me an email or let me know next class if you read something that makes these a little bit more different. Okay. Gross earnings, pay per item times the number of items produced. Okay. So if you produce 250 items and you're paid, I don't know, 10 cents per item or something like that, then you made whatever you made. All right. Okay. Example 1, Stacy Arrington is paid 73 cents for sewing a jacket collar, 86 cents for sewing a sleeve with cuffs, and 94 cents for a lapel. 1 week she sewed 318 jacket collars, 112 sleeves with cuffs, and 37 lapels. Find her gross earnings. So I'm not going to lie to you guys, they come up with the absolute weirdest examples for us to work on. Like, so weird. I'm sure there is a seamstress out there who has had to start or do a similar job to this, but I just think it's an interesting problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to match everything up and we will multiply them together and add them. Okay. Of course, you may use your calculators. If anybody gets it before me, please let us know. All right. Let me know what you guys get.
$463.24.
Oh, yep, because I totally added it instead of multiplied there. Tell me it again. 463.
24.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to tell you guys, something that is completely easy to happen. Instead of multiplying this section here, I definitely added it. That's what my mistake was there. So make sure you double check yourself in the calculator so you don't make any errors like I did. Okay. And I will show you it nicely in a nicely more written out version. You don't have to do the table. If the table helps you stay organized, you may, of course, do the table. I think it's a bit much, but if you do end up doing the table, please make sure you take a picture of it and send it in your work. Okay? Once we have everybody in, again, I will give my pet peeve of the assessments so far. Right. Anyone have any questions on this style? Didn't we write down a different number?
I said 463.
Yeah. What went wrong there? Hold on. So 318 times 0.73.
Oh, it was 232 for the 318 times 0.73, but I accidentally put in my calculator 332, not 232.
There we go. Okay. Okay. No worries. I mean, all of YouTube will know that I didn't check you, but whatever. Now they'll know that we we found our error there. So, and I think that's another good thing to talk about too, because you guys will see whenever I give you feedback, I'm not really terrible on completely dinging you. If you make a small math error like that would have been, Tim, then, it's not like your whole, as long as the process is correct, I'm not going to completely throw you guys under the bus because you make one small error. All right. Okay. Determine the gross earnings for differential piecework. Quotas. All right. So as soon as you hear the word quota in an interview, depending upon the type of person you are, that may be the point where you say, thanks so much for having me. I'll let you know. You don't let me know. Okay. Quotas can be rather tough. Trying to think of a good, police officers. When do police officers love to pull us over for speeding?
End of the month.
End of the month. Why is it?
So they hit their quota.
So they hit their quota. Okay. So let's just forget about the fact that, we have people robbing banks and, kidnapping little kids. Let's just get the speeders. Okay. So may or may not have had some teenage angst with getting pulled over a lot. Okay. So yes, quotas. Obviously, you're not going to turn down an opportunity to be a police officer, depending upon, I guess certain beliefs. It's a really good job if you can get it in a good department. But yeah, they have quotas. So that tends to sway some of their behavior at different times of the month. Okay. The best thing for you to do is just avoid going out at the end of the month if you drive really fast, or let someone else drive you. It's fine. I will let you all know that you don't have to worry about me anymore because now I'm old. So apparently I drive like a grandmother, which is not true, but I drive cautiously safe. Okay. All right. Okay, so here's another example that we can take a quick look at. This is an individual who enjoys working with their hands and are willing to bend, cut, and insert discrete electronic components such as integrated circuits into standard printed circuit boards and solder as required. Most people are going to be scared away by soldering. It's really not hard. It's kind of like a scarier version of using glue. It just can hurt a lot if it gets on your skin. And the pay scale is as follows. So note they have a 1 to 100, and it's $2 for each, $2.10 per unit. 101 to 150, and it bumps up to 225, and 151 or more is 240. Here's where you have to be careful. Just because you get to the 101 to 150 range or the 151 plus range does not mean you come over here to 240 and that whole 151 is 240 a piece. It's not how this works. Okay, so you come in here, if you hit 100, it's 100 times the 210. Okay, it's this rate if you fall into this category. If you exceed that category, it's this rate. Here, let me do it in a different color now. It's this rate for 1 to 100, and then it's this rate to anything over that. And then if you get to the third tier, it's this rate, and then this rate again, and then this rate. Okay? I tell you this ridiculously because you have no idea how many times before class started that I was doing the homework and I would get to one of these piecewise examples and I would be like, why? I hit into the 151. Why is it not $2.40 each? It is if it's in that category. Okay? Are we all capturing this idea?
I'm sorry. I was just talking to my dad. I missed that entire.
Okay. Well, I'm not gonna redraw it for you, but
Actually,
I
I can watch the video. You're good.
Yeah, I will re-explain it. So let's look at an example in order to re-explain it. Okay, so let's say that let's say we have 152 units. Okay, it's our fourth day or whatever working. We get 152 units. To figure out your earnings for that day, it's going to be 100 times 210 plus, what is that, 49? 49 times 225 plus 2 times 240. Okay, 149 plus 2. Does that work out right? 149, 2. Guess this is a 50. Sorry, guys. Wanted to make sure my math added up. Okay, so do we see that? The prices are per unit, but it has to be per unit within that range. Okay, you're not just going to take the 152 units and multiply it by the 240. All right, I wanted to break that down for you because that was a mistake I was making, and I made it a lot until it finally just kind of clicked in my brain. All right, so do we understand this table a little bit now?
Yes, thank you.
All right, good deal. If you guys end up having issues with that, please let me know and I will explain it again. So here's 214. They did it a little bit differently. They took the total, they subtracted off 100, then they know that the first 100 is the 210 each. Then they took the remainder, 114, they subtracted off the 50, multiplied it by the 225, and then finally the 64 is multiplied by the 240, and then they added it all up. Okay, so super, super good example. Definitely something you want to totally grasp. Okay, all right. Okay, how many slides are in this one? All right, I will try to get us there, but I don't know. Can anybody stay over just like a few minutes so we can just wrap this section up? Hopefully. All right. So we're going to find the gross pay for the piecework with a guaranteed hourly wage. Piecework and differential piecework rates are frequently modified to include a guaranteed hourly pay rate, often necessary to satisfy federal and state laws concerning minimum wages. Okay. Employer must pay either the minimum wage or the piecework earnings, which is higher. Okay, so here's what's important to know. Let's say that you are the world's worst assembly line worker, and for some reason you still get called back into work. If you make such a low amount of units in the given time frame, that minimum wage is higher than your piecework earnings, you get minimum wage. However, if you're the world's best assembly worker and you make amazing amounts of units, then you get the piecework earnings. Okay, are we understanding that difference there? Cool. All right. All right, here's another example. Go ahead and take a look at it. Okay. So Monday, there are 32 tires, Tuesday, 24 tires, Wednesday, 34, Thursday 22, and Friday 33. So if the tire center is paid $10.50 per hour for an 8-hour day, or $3.20 per tire installed, whichever is higher, find the weekly earnings for an employee having the following production rate. So what do you think your first step is going to be to figure out which one would be higher?
Find the weekly rate.
Right. So you want to take your $3.20 and you're going to multiply it by each day's tire production. That's step one. And you can write it all down. I'm going to add them up and write them only once because there's not a lot of room here. So definitely make sure you're also working through it, because clearly we have already all learned that we can make mistakes. So I get a production total of 464. Okay. The other option is $10.50 for an 8-hour day. So let's assume that he had a 40-hour work week. And the regular, that is not an R. Regular hourly ends up being $420. So which one do you think most people would prefer? And actually, which one legally does the company have to pay the person?
Production.
Yes, in this case, it'll be the production. Okay. Don't worry if you didn't get it. It's going to be on the next page. So this is different too. So I did it by the week. I believe Pearson has you doing it per day. So if you see these ones that went above 30, they all were over like the daily amount, which would be $84. So do it by day. Just go ahead and do it their by day version. Honestly, if you were doing this in real life, I'm sure you could ask the company, but I would have it worked out where I would have it by week instead of by day, because if we add this up now, 102, 40 plus 84 plus 108, 80 plus 84 plus 105, 60, 484 and 80 cents. So I guess you're making about $20 more. Really, it's just more for them to tax. So, but yes, do it per day. If you mess up and you do it per week, I'm not gonna take it off that much. As long as you work out the process and you show me that you're comparing it, whether you're doing it hourly for 8 hours or you do it for the week, that's the same process to me. I'm going to give it to you. All right. Okay, so we are on slide 15. There are 25 slides total, so we're looking at only 10 more slides, but it is 2:06. So I do want to give you guys the option to either try to finish it up, probably in only 10-ish minutes, or do you want to pick up here on Thursday? We do have 2 more sections.
I mean, I'm fine with picking it up here later.
All right. Okay, someone remind me that we are on slide 15 on section 6.2.
You also said earlier for someone to remind you to take attendance. Just want to make sure.
Oh, yes.